Good evening, everyone. Special Tuesday night show. We are going to have a lot of fun talking about history, gaming, um, and we've got a special guest to do it. A few quick announcements. Tomorrow, I have Master Swag King returning. We're going to talk about Captain America Brave New World and what's going on with superhero movies. Is 2025 the year that will finally KO the superhero movie? And for anyone who's interested, go check out Empire of the Undying Sun over at empireoftheundyingsun.com. We have signups for a future Kickstarter campaign, which will be in the summer. And that's my campaign guide, by the way. We will have a 1E edition as well as the 5E edition. And you can go, if you've already backed, you will get that 1E for free, but go check out the site anyways, and you could see the adventure supplements that are coming on live. We will have a second one by the Dungeon Delver called, this month is the Rat King. So we will have that. But tonight, we have the Duke of the D12 system, the Baron of Blackwall himself. Todd, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I was able to catch a little bit of your channel earlier today, but I basically am here because John recommended you.
Oh, John. Yeah, and anybody who is interested, go check out John's Long Box. Not right now. You can do that when we're done here.
Yeah.
But John's Long Box, a lot of great shows, a lot of great interviews. And he also does a lot of solo gaming. So if you're interested in that. Okay, so my first question, this is my Rorschach test question for my gaming guests. What's the perfect game? In whatever way you take that question to mean.
Well, I don't think there is such a thing, of course, but if we are trying to get near perfect, you want something that plays quickly, has tactical complexity, and supports multiple play styles, and ideally can handle both a small and a large group.
Nice. Good answer. Good answer. And you are the creator of Blackwall Games.
Yeah, my friend Nate and I are co-owners of the company, and we are co-authors on the 2 books we've got out so far. We're working on 2 or 3 others. I do a bit more of the writing, and Nate does a bit more of the concepts. If that makes sense, there's a somewhat. We both do some of each thing, but we lean more in those 2 directions, respectively.
Nice. So first of all, how did you get started with gaming?
Oh, other than wargaming, which I did quite a bit when I was younger, for RPGs, I started on 2nd edition AD&D.
Oh, nice. That was, I had all the books. Well, I shouldn't say all the books. I had the main books, the Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, but I could never find anyone to play with at that time. Those were those dark years.
Well, I actually got invited before I'd heard of it. I had some people at my school who were playing, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to come play this game with us?"
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't like a religious thing or anything, but that was like around the time when it started to become not cool. Like like before, nobody knew what Dungeons and Dragons was, so nobody cared. But then once people like heard about it, you became too much of a nerd. For some reason, Marvel superhero role-playing game was okay, but not 2E, not Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know why that worked, but
yeah, I had a similar thing. My parents wound up forbidding me from doing that and hanging out with those friends at some point, and then years later, they wound up changing their minds entirely, which was interesting.
So clearly, gaming has become important enough to you that, well into adulthood, you not only continue it, but you have decided to make your own game.
Oh yeah.
So what is it like inevitable that like if you game long enough, you're going to end up either creating your own modules or a new game, or is there something that you were like looking to fix, or like a niche you were trying to fill?
Well, a little of both. I think over time, especially if you're running games, over time you'll want to make your own content, and that's something that with Horde Wars we encourage the game masters to do. It's why the setting is focused around a single continent rather than a whole planet, to give you room to add your own content. But that being said, Nate and I set out to make a new game, or a few new games actually, because we found a lot of modern games lacking in the ability to play quickly, which is especially important with younger players, and also with older ones who have limited time, right?
Yeah.
But also that let you really be heroes, by which I mean where the characters are genuinely risking death, but also might succeed at destroying the dragon or defeating the lich or whatever the problem might be. That there is an element of heroism and not simply being superheroes who basically can't be touched, which is kind of the direction that Pathfinder and D&D, for example, are leaning in the modern era.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As my own little promo in the beginning, for my campaign guide, I have had a test group going since different parts of like 2019. And so it's like, okay, how do you make this not suck with the monsters? Especially like they're either pushovers or, it's hard to find that sweet spot between like challenging or just murdering everything.
Yeah, and so Nate and I had a little bit of experience. He used to be a rep for Paizo, and I've worked on some other games before as well. And so he's played, I don't know, something. I think he's run something goofy like 35 different RPGs, like for campaigns. I think I've run more games than Nate probably, but I've done less different systems than him. Anyway, so that let us get kind of a breadth of experience, and we read even more than we played before as we were working on Horde Wars Basic and Advanced. And Advanced is basically a 300-page book that gives you everything you need to play the entire game. It includes a full bestiary, so we're talking about 200 or so monster and beast stat blocks, NPC stat blocks, a setting chapter, sample adventure, starting area, everything you need. 21 different starting careers. And in our game, you pick 2 and pair them together to make your kind of your class for your character. And so you've got like over 400 starting combinations effectively of character, plus different species you can play. We got a chapter on nautical adventures, running the game, domain play, so on. So it's a complete game, and we spent the time to make sure that it fit in a relatively small amount of space, but in real measurable ways. We're giving you equal or more than you'll get in 3 books from Paizo or Wizards of the Coast.
That's pretty impressive size-wise, I should say.
Yeah. Same for like magic items. Our artifacts, we have like 120, 150 unique ones, plus some about a few thousand magic weapons you can generate.
So you mentioned classes, and I'm kind of curious about your philosophy on classes. If we look at like the 5e system, some people would say the class system, there's too much bloat, whereas like they don't mind a billion different subclasses. The classes themselves, there's too much crossover. Do you think that that's an issue, or would you say that
I think that they've that they're over designing. So here's an example of a starting huntsman. I can zoom that in a little bit more by getting rid of this. But basically, this is a career, and each character starts with 2 careers in Horde Wars for a player character. Okay. NPCs have 1. And so you would get all of the starting abilities. So if you were a huntsman, you get these starting skills: athletics, combat, one of your choice. You'd get a bonus skill at survival, be good at tracking, have this battle hardened ability to avoid getting dropped quickly in battle, and then have this glimmer oil ability that basically lets you temporarily coat your weapon in a specific kind of metal to do extra damage to certain creatures. Now that would be half of your starting abilities, and you would pair this with something else that gives you its own ability suite. And this lets you make something like a dedicated wizard, in which case you'd pick two varieties of wizard, or you could do something like a huntsman crusader, in which case you're a crusader who is very good in the wilderness, or you might pair up, I don't know, a tavern wench with an acolyte and be some kind of horrible cult leader.
Okay. Nice.
So we do have a good variety of different options, and we've got sample characters in the back of the book. But then when you hit a certain level, you have the option to level up in one of your careers. You pick a capstone, right? And so each career offers you 2 capstones, and the species offer another. So you have a total of 5 you can pick from for your character. But you will only ever get 2.
Okay.
Which means even 2 characters who happen to pick the same 2 starting careers will tend to diverge over time in what they specialize in.
Okay. So then at least over time, every character that's in a party will end up with unique abilities.
Oh yeah. And we also have features and perks that happen at the other levels where you're not gaining a new tier that let you further customize your character. Yeah. In terms of art, I think we have over 100 unique pieces of art in here. Nice. Should be a little over 100. And they're all, real humans, no AI stuff. And that's expensive. That's the reality of producing games. But here's an example.
Oh, very cool.
So that is one of our wyverns.
Very cool. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned AI. I think we're just going to have to accept as a fact of life. You will see more and more products just using AI for the art and for writing and this and that. But one thing I've noticed is I've started to see more. I've definitely seen some 5e modules on Kickstarter and whatnot that have AI art, and they all look the same. So, it's better than the author's stick figure drawings that they would have had otherwise. But in terms of being a good fit for a product, none of these things are going to stand out. Whereas, you got to pay for it. But if you get actual human beings to make the art, I think your project is definitely going to rise above.
I agree. I also think, though, that it is possible to get AI art and then clean it up and make it look good. The problem is you need an actual artist to do that afterwards.
Yes. And that's exactly the problem. Most of the people I've seen who they want to post their AI art, they don't understand what makes good art in the first place, which is why most of it tends to look like crap. And then when you point that out, they don't understand.
Yeah, but absolutely. So anyway, there's a bunch of art in here. And like I said, we have chapters on everything that you would typically need in a medieval fantasy RPG. If you want to play with spaceships and aliens, different game. We are working on that.
Awesome.
But, medieval fantasy, yeah. This has lots of stuff. Even rules for jousting, if you really want to have a jousting tournament. And just to give you an idea of how we handled the setting, we do have a map nice. with a history up here of the setting, but each nation is a 2-page spread. So you get the heraldry, the kind of description of how the nation is organized, who lives there, couple major laws, typically one relating to inheritance and one relating to something else unusual about the culture. And then you get 3 of these blocks, which are basically a set location with sample NPCs who each have their own agenda and a quest or adventure relating to them.
Ah.
And so,
Mhm.
in the, what is GUOGC?
Oh, the Guac is the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention, run by the Dungeon Delver. It
Depends on
is
if I
in
get an
May.
invite, man. We're looking at being in Washington, D.C., Minnesota, Texas, parts of the Great Lakes this year. So
Wow.
if we get an invite online, yeah,
Well,
I would be up for it.
the Guac is an online gaming convention.
Yeah, I follow.
So I mean, if let's see, I don't have the link at the moment, but if you check out, I think it's _Dungeon Delver on Twitter. He's got links, and he's got a channel as well.
Mhm.
And he is on the Nerd Council of Doom with me this Saturday. So I think that probably mentioned it there, but yeah, people can run games as much as you want, and yeah, it's a good chance to introduce it to people, I think. But
Cool.
sorry, getting back to the game itself.
Yeah,
Getting back
absolutely.
to Horde Wars there.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to show basically that each nation is a 2-page spread. This is deliberate so that if you set up 2-page view for your PDF, or if you choose to order a physical copy in the US, you can literally open that or have that displayed and see all the information for the nation in one place. We do the same thing for monster stat blocks. You're not going to need to be flipping around. We let me quick find an example. I think the Lich would be a good one.
Some good looking art.
Yep, just skipping past it. It's very exciting. But actually, I do like this one.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's one of the. It's a named Goblin King. This one's really cool too. But getting over to, the Hornlord will be a good example. People fleeing from him. But if we get down to liches, so you'll see that our lich, all the spells are written out for you, so you don't have to flip around in the book.
Okay.
That's
Nice.
something that actually I found incredibly annoying in every edition of D&D, basically.
Yeah.
That I had to have all these other books to reference or all these other pages kind of bookmarked to flip back and forth, and that sucks. That's not the optimal way to run monsters. And this kind of thing works much better where it's actually written out for you to be able to use right there on the page. And all of our monsters are designed that way so that, and as much as possible, the rest of the book as well, so you don't have to flip around and have everything you need on that 2-page spread. That's
a good idea, actually. And that's also my theory of why D&D Beyond became so popular. It's because people were tired of flipping through the handbooks. So give us a little bit of flavor of the game. We were talking a little bit backstage. You are a big history guy. So how would you put this? Like how much of it is from of the I guess you say flavor and background of the game comes directly from history or from mythologies versus you decided to go with your own all brand new
I mean, quite a lot plays with historical themes, but there's some stuff that's brand new. There are some unique monsters and beasts that some that we made up that do not exist anywhere else. Others are a play on things that exist in mythology or in other games. But overall, a lot of it is rooted in history because that helps it feel real. Now, obviously, we're mixing and matching it. You're not literally playing in medieval Europe. That would be a little predictable. And of course, some of those creatures, a good chunk of them, probably weren't running around medieval Europe. I doubt that there were unicorns that looked like horses running around medieval Europe.
Yeah.
Um, rhinos, however, that's a more interesting question. As there's decent evidence that they were running around China, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We were speaking briefly of medicinal stuff. Rhino horn appeared in early Chinese medicine books from
Yeah,
about
and they also
2,000 years
describe
ago.
basically hunting them or encountering them
Yeah,
at different times.
yeah, yeah.
And so when you read like in what today would be Russia, when you read writings from peoples who lived in that area who describe unicorns, I have a suspicion I know what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
I think they mean rhinos.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, it makes sense from the European point of view as well. They had never seen anything like a rhino. But if
Yeah.
all the stories came from like Egypt, well, Egypt's right on the border of rhino territory,
Yep.
and we know it wasn't as deserty, so there probably were some rhinos up further north. Once that story gets to Europe,
Yeah.
I don't know what a rhino is. Oh, a horse, okay, it's big. It's a big mammal, horse. Yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't even include the horse. It would be one horn. Like that's the name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. What's it look like? I don't know. So that kind of thing. So we tried to play around with that. It's one of the reasons actually that we have dinosaurs in the book, is because there are some reasonably what's the word I'm looking for? Accounts that happen to line up very well that indicate some dinosaur-like creatures were getting killed by humans in the not so distant past. Specifically, the Chinese dragon type is attested not only in China, but is described specifically by 3 different eyewitness accounts from a single event that Romans fought in Africa. It's the same creature. It's pretty recognizable, actually, in the description. So were they making stuff up that the Chinese also made up? I think probably not. I think probably there was a creature rather like what was being described. Anyway, so we tried to play around with a little of that, but obviously there are also completely made up things like pixies, or I don't know, what's another example, or beetles that actually look like gemstones and gold, right?
Well, I have seen beetles with like iridescent blue
Oh,
shells,
sure.
so I
Sure.
can
But that look
understand
like
the
a
confusion.
coin?
Yeah, no.
Right. However, we have those in our setting because they are the natural predators of goblins who are hilariously greedy
Interesting.
and will run towards what they think is treasure, and they are wrong.
Sounds like a lot of adventuring parties I know too.
Yeah. Happy bonus.
So you have the historical settings. One thing I'm curious about is religions. Now, briefly, we were talking about backstage, and you mentioned that you were going to have a talk with a guy who's a pagan, like an actual modern day, I would assume, worshiping pagan.
Yeah, a couple of them. One guy named Matt, another guy named Stein.
So how much has I guess I'd say, well, let me couch it in this term. For me, some of the problem with D&D and religion has always been like you have a very much Christian worldview of a good and an evil, and then we sort of throw neutral in there. But then you try to make it like more like a pagan world where there are many, many gods, whereas like, Venus wasn't necessarily good or evil, and Ares wasn't necessarily good or evil. But they might have had conflict with each other. So depending on, if you're on Team Venus or Team Ares, but you could be theoretically good or evil and worship either of them. How do you sort of run? How does that sort of influence Horde Wars?
So if you're going to play in the Middle Ages, you do need something like the Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church was a big deal then. They owned something goofy, like 10 to 20% of all the land. They had multiple military orders. They had multiple armies. they regularly humbled kings during this period. So they have to exist, right? If you're gonna play in the Middle Ages, you have to have something like that. So I'm not a Roman Catholic. I do not approve of some of their choices over the years. Others I approve more of, but so we have a Church of the Creator, monotheistic, and there is a cult of the Dark One, our analog for Satan worshipers, who are doing so on purpose, right? But we also have, I think, 6 or 7 other religions we introduce. So, like, the Easterns are polytheists, and they are, loosely speaking, following some that we made up, but a few of the Celtic gods.
Okay.
And are generally Pictish in flavor themselves as far as their culture goes. And then we also have the Orcs, who are polytheists and have a whole other pantheon, a little more bloodthirsty, as one might expect. And our Orcs are very much an analog for Vikings in our setting.
Okay.
They are
nice.
raiding up and down the coast in longships, looking for silver and slaves.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's a fun way to play with them, and also acknowledge the source. The source of the word and of the concept is Norse, actually. And so we have a number of these kinds of things. There's some specific cults as well. One of which is based off a still extant Iranian cult that is really into fire, and they've largely ceased existing. There's only like a dozen villages that still practice that religion. But once a year, the whole country forgets they're Muslim and burns lots of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you're how into like other Eastern religions, like Buddhism. They'll do a very similar thing. In Japan, they call it obon. I can't remember what it's called in China, but it's like very, very similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we also have a monstrous but intelligent and somewhat civilized race known as or species known as the Dracarans, and they worship dragons as their gods.
Ooh.
But like physical dragons that are there, right? That you can see and fight, and that can be very interesting as well, because the players can functionally kill their gods. That could happen.
Ooh.
And then think about how they react.
Once again, drawing on history, I see.
Yeah.
It reminds me a few years ago. I don't know if you know this guy, Tom Roswell. He's a British. He makes all sorts of videos and stuff, but he is a pagan. I tried to get him on the show because I wanted a good explanation of like, how does paganism work? Like, is there church on Sundays? There's stories of sacrifices. Do you have to sacrifice? Do you have altars in the house? That sort of thing.
Right.
And he, super nice guy. I don't want to seem ungrateful, but he turned me down and he says, you talk about comic books, and the Thor comic book is an offense to my religion. And I was like, and I wrote him back and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you or anything. And that's kind of why I want you on. Like, please explain, how it works for you. And he basically, in the nicest British possible way, told me to F off.
Oh, no.
but no, he wasn't mean. He was like super polite. He's like, no, I see you didn't mean any offense, blah, blah, blah. How do you, like one of the problem with me as a non-pagan, one of the problems for me is like differentiating people who are trying to be pagans from like New Agers who are just like modern hippies going for, whatever the cool new thing is.
Right.
So how do you, when you're writing religions for your game, do you feel the need to sort of like stick to the source material, or are you free to sort of play around with things?
Well, some
Or
we've made up whole cloth. Others are deliberately inspired by specific things in real life. And one is a pretty direct ripoff of a ripoff. So I don't know if you know this or not, but the Cthulhu mythos is not something that Lovecraft made up. He almost entirely stole and rearranged it from other actual religions. Not there was some stuff he made up, to be fair, and the arrangement is his. But for example, he uses like Dagon as one of the old ones. I mean, Dagon was a ancient god of multiple cities in the Middle East with specific characteristics, right? He does the same thing with several other Canaanite and Babylonian deities, and so we do have a little bit of a nod to both him and the Canaanite religion in that we bring 3 of those back in one of the cults.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so and in that case, we actually would like the game masters to lean on the historical source material because, frankly, those cults were terrifying. The more you learn about them, probably about the nicest things that can be said are temple prostitution and the STDs that go with it. And the worshippers of Dagon had a weird hobby of jumping over doorways, or rather door frames, I should say. They wouldn't step on the threshold. Those are the least offensive of their hobbies, I guess.
Interesting. I know that in Africa and then in Asia, like you do not step on the threshold of the door.
Yeah.
That's like terribly insulting.
Yeah. Followers of Dagon don't do that. The other ones totally did. The other Canaanite deities, that wasn't an issue.
Yeah, for me, I think like that whole region is pretty fertile territory since like Roman, Greek, Norse gods, people still kind of know from popular fiction. Virtually everything else they don't know anything about.
Oh, absolutely. Like most D&D players I encounter are unaware that Tiamat is a straight rip of a historical religion.
Yeah. And for me, it's always it makes the world feel more real when you try to stick with those traditions, at least as much as possible. You know, you got to have a little wiggle room for the DM and the players, but you know, it's much easier than telling people, "Oh, I'll give you like the thinnest of gruel, and then you go make the rest." It really helps them to have like, you know, at least a scaffolding to hang their stories on.
Oh, absolutely. And if you pick somewhat obscure real world religions that they can look up or variants of them, it makes it really easy for a game master to explore beyond it if it is appropriate for their particular campaign, right?
Yeah.
I have many years ago played a what would you call it? I played a character who was basically starting a cult along with the rest of the party and going around spreading this not exactly made up religion, but the details were made up in the campaign setting. And but part of that meant that our characters had to know a lot, and the players had to know a lot more about the religious lore than pretty much any campaign that I've ever played otherwise. And it's because we had to role play trying to trick people into joining our cult.
That's interesting. I sort of played a character like that. He was from a temple that was destroyed while he was out. He was sent out on like a mission. He comes back and it's all gone. So he's like going around like full Jehovah's Witness, giving out pamphlets. You know, and the thing that amazed me is how much it freaked out the other players. Like, they were just like, whoa. It's like good times.
Yeah.
But, so getting back to Horde Wars for a second. So you mentioned possible spaceships and laser weapons and whatnot in the future. Is it all going to be within Horde Wars, or is it going to be like a different game, but that more or less uses the same system, and therefore you can sort of almost like original Gamma World in D&D. Like you could sort of
Yes.
take characters between one and the two, but they were distinct
Yes.
games.
Yeah, the intent is that we'd use the same core mechanics for like
Okay.
how turn order works, how actions work, this kind of thing. And then you'd be having genre specific rules. So, for example, object durability would be quite different in the modern era or the space
Mhm.
age, or futuristic space age compared to Middle Ages. If you have high explosives, a stone wall is much less of a problem than if what you have is axes and battering rams.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, and so some of those sorts of rules would change to match the genre. We're also working on a superhero game, but I think our next release, we're aiming for November. We'll see if we make it or not. Is tentatively entitled Dropship, and that is a narrow slice of the sci-fi game, and it is focused on human soldiers being dropped off on alien worlds to fight aliens.
Oh, nice.
And then the intent is, if that does well enough, if it breaks even or turns a profit, that then we turn around and use that to fund the second book, which would be the kind of to the stars version, including all the space combat stuff, which we have play tested those rules. The space combat rules have been ready for half a decade, so we're really looking forward to getting this published.
I can imagine. So then do you guys sort of have the intent that at some point you want to have like a game for every genre?
Yeah, yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Oh, nice. So you
And
mentioned, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh. Well, I was going to say you mentioned play testing.
Yeah,
I like I mentioned before, I've been play testing my campaign guide for more or less for 5 years, on and off. What for you makes a good play test group?
well, we had over 100 playtesters for Horde
Dang.
Wars Basic and more for Advanced. And they put in, I think at this point, it's probably got to be something goofy like 5,000 hours. But initially, it was over 1,000 hours for Basic. Um, and that helped a lot. That really improved the game, helped catch things that people were unclear about, or that they were trying to exploit in a way we did not intend. um, and yeah, so hopefully that answers the question. I
Mhm.
think a large group, and it's important other people run your game or your product before,
Yeah.
not just you. You have to know that a person who is brand new to the hobby can understand what you wrote. Uh, and so we've done both people I know. I've taught other people how to game master, and Nate has as well. People he knows. We also went to conventions and had just random people show up and try out our game, and that helped. And then once Basic was out, some of our customers, Brian in chat there is one of them. I think I see a few others as well. Um, Played with us online and got to try out some of the advanced material before we released it. And every once in a while, they had suggestions that usually the original suggestion did not make it in the book, but a version did
Mm.
after further play testing and development. And that was really valuable and helped a lot.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think finding people who will do the best that they can to break your game
Yeah.
is invaluable, because they surely will, and then you can fix it before release.
Yes.
That's a very impressive amount of playtesters.
Like I said, I'd been game mastering for a while, probably at this point nearly a quarter century. uh, and and also I have done some other writing, mostly free stuff or consulting on other projects or that kind of thing, and uh, and that helped me get to know some additional people,
Mhm.
to try stuff out. But um, I think the most ridiculous like RPG project I had done prior to working on the on Horde Wars and Horde Wars Advanced is I once did I want to say 180-hour campaign in 2 weeks. And I invited people from who I knew from all over the country, and we did a superhero campaign. And I ran like 15 hours a day or something ridiculous.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was fun. Like it was a single superhero game with like 30, 25, 30 players. Yeah, a lot of fun, but very, very busy. And like people took off, like took vacation. A few traveled in from out of state, like Massachusetts, California, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think my wife would approve of me testing for that much. I'd have to do that when she was visiting her mom or something.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. We're in kind of a weird place where Wizards of the Coast has spent the last few years seemingly doing whatever they can to demoralize their player base.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
So the last time that happened, we ended up with Paizo and Pathfinder, and I consider Castles and Crusades to come out of that. Do you think we're at that point now? Whereas it's the industry seems to ebb and flow, where D&D will be on the downside, and then it'll be sort of like in primacy again. Do you think we're on that downslope where a lot of smaller indie games are going to rise up?
I think so, but also you're seeing, I think, a fatigue in some of the newer players who are slowly dropping out of the hobby.
Yeah.
So I think there are less players, and will be for a while, than there were, say, 5 years ago. Or even 3 years ago. In part, one of the ways you can sort of tell is the waning popularity of those live play streams or the recorded streams. Also, the like for D&D, they have something like 1 in 8, 1 in 6, something like that, of their D&D Beyond subscribers have actually, if they each only made one character, and that's probably not true, only 1 in 6, 1 in 8 would have even made a character in the new edition of D&D. That's really bad. They have like 19 million subscribers and only 3.6 million new characters. And if you assume everyone made 2 characters, it's a much lower percentage. That is a very bad sign for them. That would be like, that's basically the equivalent of releasing a brand new product, a sequel product, and selling less than 1/10 of your previous product. That is very, very bad.
I mean, in all fairness to Wizards of the Coast, I do think some of it has to do with just the time things were released. Most people start playing D&D somewhere when they're in their early teens. So, last year was the 10th anniversary. So people who were, let's say, 13 in 2024, they're now like 23, 24 years old, which is usually the time when like, oh crap, I'm out of college. I don't have time to play games.
Right. The 2014 players are probably dropping off anyway.
Aging out a bit. And then you also have the issue of, a lot of this, in my opinion, a lot of the success of the 2014 5e was, like you mentioned, the live plays, which were very new and very novel 10 years ago. And then also COVID, it kept everyone home and people had free time. And virtual tabletops were doing well enough that you could play. I think now people want to go out and touch grass, as the kids say. So it's all bad news for Wizards of the Coast there.
Yeah. Oh, and to answer a comment in chat, Yag, if you are still there, the main difference between basic, which you apparently have, and advanced is you're going from 180 pages to 300 pages. You're going from levels 1 through 4 to levels 1 through 12, and you'd be getting obviously a bunch more artwork and magic items and this kind of stuff, but also chapters on other kinds of play, on nautical adventures, on running your own domain, on on the setting, right? Rather than just kind of being focused on low-level dungeon delving like basic is.
How does the leveling system in this work? I mean,
Yeah.
Is there a leveling system, and like
Yes.
what's
There
it
is. And like you might
analogous to?
expect, levels 1 through 12.
Okay, nice.
Uh, we figured if we were going to play with the D12, we might as well lean into it. But each tier of play is 4 levels. So when you hit 5th level and 9th level, you're entering the new tier of play, and that's when you're getting some of the more powerful abilities for leveling up.
Hmm.
Typically, you're getting 2 to 4 experience per completed adventure, and it takes you 12 experience points to gain a new level.
Okay.
Um, and so there we do have some variant options, a way to use treasure to level up instead,
Oh, okay.
uh, as well as an option to play on hard mode, which we do not recommend for new players. But you can do that if you'd like. And Yeah, I think I like that better than the kind of curve and
Mhm.
random numbers for XP. It's not based on specifically killing monsters, though you're going to have to do a fair amount of that. It's based on completing adventures.
Okay. So basically, completing in whatever sense it finds, like if instead of
Yeah,
killing the dragon, you can hire the dragon to do something, that would be a win potentially.
potentially. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Unless, of course, you were hired to kill the dragon, and that was the adventure.
Although maybe,
then you've switched adventures. You've gone, oh no, we're betraying our patron.
or maybe the party decides they're going to make a contract with the dragon. So the
Mhm.
dragon goes town to town and they get the villagers' money to
Oh,
slay the
sure.
dragon. And then the
Very
dragon
dragon
just goes
heart.
to the next town. Yeah.
Yeah.
More gold for everyone.
Yes. Well, except the villagers, of course. Uh, but
Um,
but yeah, so that's hopefully that kind of answers the question.
mhm.
Um the power level roughly would be like a 3rd through 15th level D&D character from, say, 3rd edition or 5th. Those are broadly speaking compatible in terms of like spells or abilities.
Mhm.
Um so right around there. You don't quite get to that sort of epic busted play. And while you would be as powerful as those characters, you will not have the hit points they do. Uh, you
Okay.
start out with 18 hit points and you get 2 a level. There's a little bit of capacity to mess with that, but in a world where you're typically taking 1 to 8 dice of damage, um, that's that number of hit points. You can die.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
uh,
How do you? I am kind of curious. There's always the long rest debate
ah,
in 5e at least, and sort of the more video game mechanics. Uh, do do you hold with the theory that hit point recovery should be slower, or do you prefer like everything comes back overnight, or with a magic
we
potion or something? Or
We take a points of light style for this. So the idea is, if you are out in the wilderness, you will not, in an unsafe area, you will not regain hit points because you cannot rest safely. You can get your abilities back, like if you have some kind of limited use abilities, spells, this kind of thing. You can
Mhm.
you can sleep and get that back, but hit points you only regain after a full day's rest in a safe location,
Okay.
like a town, a castle, this kind of thing. And affliction, which is like can be used for exhaustion or fatigue. You only get 1 level of affliction back per day of rest. So if you are very exhausted or fatigued, it may take you several days in a town before you recover from that. And the affliction mechanic also, one of the reasons we use the D12, or a cool thing about using the D12, other than just almost doubling the odds of critting, natural 12 is a crit instead of a natural 20,
Hmm.
which means a lot of our weapons have critical hit triggers that you can actually have happen pretty regularly, like a stunning effect or
Mhm.
extra damage or all different other things, um, knocking someone prone, what have you. But also, it let us embed penalties for for fatigue, exhaustion, dehydration. So instead of rolling uh, a die and putting a penalty on it, what you're doing instead is you're rolling a smaller die. So you go from a D12 to a D10 to a D8 and so on.
Okay, that makes sense.
And again, this is really designed for speed of play. we probably don't have time. I have maybe 10 or 20 minutes left. We probably don't have time to go into the details, but the short version is Nate and I took great pains to make this game play quickly. And I know we succeeded because when we go demonstrate this at conventions, the D&D and Pathfinder players come over to see what we are doing because the turn order is moving that much faster.
So I'm going to assume no bonus actions. I'm going to assume you found a way to streamline things.
We have so it's really driving player engagement and attention that we found really speeds things up. So we have something called maneuvers, which is a once a round of play, once around the table, the ability that you can use, and you may have multiple choices of maneuvers, you may have multiple options, but you can only ever use one per round in total. So you have to pick which one. But you could potentially block an incoming attack, or you could get an extra attack, or you could cast a spell like haste or magic shield or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps drive player engagement, helps them pay attention because they could at any moment do something off turn once per round. So they're paying more attention. Also, our turn order, rather than trying to track individual initiative, you are rolling when a combat begins. You all roll, adding the D12 to your reflexes bonus, and then the high number goes first. If there's a tie between the game master and a player wins the tie. Ties between players, we let them sort it out. And then from there, it simply goes around the table. The other numbers do not matter. Only the high number matters. And we found that saves nearly half an hour per session because we have multiple combats. And when we were trying out other initiative systems, it took about 5 minutes. And we heard this from other game masters online as well. It took about 5 minutes to kind of sort out turn order, and in wasted time of players not knowing whose turn was next.
Mm-hmm.
And they're used to, anyone who's played board games is used to the idea of going around the table.
Yeah.
And the upside is speed, and the cost of that you might think is there, which is a lack of variance. We actually found that you get the same variety of turn orders over time. Not in any given instance, of course, but over the course of, say, 7 different game sessions, you'll have just as much variety as you did with the slower initiative systems.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And the same thing is true for spells. So do you know how Fireball works, like in D&D or Pathfinder?
Sure.
Okay. So area of effect, everything in the area is rolling a saving throw, usually with different bonuses on it. And then you're rolling damage, and you're doing either the full amount or half, or maybe none if they have special abilities to each of those creatures, right? Mm-hmm. We make that into an attack roll for the wizard. So he is attempting to hit the target's defense. If he all the targets in the area, if he hits, he does full damage. If he misses, he does half. And if you have a special ability, you might avoid it. But the thing is, we found that, again, this speeds up gameplay, both because you're only rolling one attack and comparing it to hard numbers, not a series of floating bonuses and multiple rolls, but also because the wizard can crit and do double damage with the fireball, which speeds up combat in a different way.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
So a lot of these kinds of things kind of compound to help the game run faster and yet still feel very familiar to people into these sorts of games.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you said the combat has sped up the gameplay by an average of a half an hour. What would you say the average?
The turn order thing alone, yeah.
How long would you say that people are playing at a time? Is it
3 hours?
3? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And typically, like, if you look at our introductory adventure, we are, and that's not the high water mark. That we probably have you fighting like 40, 45 goblins, an ogre, some wolves, and perhaps a few other things, depending on your choices, including multiple stat blocks, casters, one's in armor, one's ambushing you, others using like cover behind pillars, and so on. So it's somewhat tactically complex because we're introducing you to game rules as you go for an introductory adventure, right? stealth and cover and so on. But also it, yeah, and that's about a 3-hour adventure for a brand new group. It can be faster, can be slower depending on your player choices. But the thing is, this game is designed such that what did I do? I think I had a party fight 90 opponents in the same combat, which
Nice.
that was pushing the envelope a little, but it's doable. You can get through it quickly enough.
Is there a possibility of solo play?
You absolutely can. It is not what the game is built for, because we encourage you to go and play games with your friends. That
Find
is
some friends, guys.
This is kind of the nature of the hobby. If you don't have friends or don't have friends who play RPGs, you can join our Guilded server and play online occasionally with us or with other customers who organize games on there. But even then, I would then encourage you to go make some friends and play with them. Just because the nature of this hobby is meant to be social.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that is one of the things that I look for in gaming is, how much of an opportunity do you have to interact with other people? Like sometimes if it's just, okay, my character does this, and then the next person, my character does that, and they're never really. It's almost like you're not really playing with the people. If it's like that, it's a little bit boring to me. I like it either from a role play aspect, or if somehow your abilities interact, or everybody's sort of got a role on the team.
Yeah, and I should say, because of the kind of points of light thing and how random encounters are rolled for travel, we incentivize the players to work together as a team. I mean, you don't have to, but if you don't, you'll probably die, because the day you betray the party, eventually you will be heading back to the village and you'll run into a T-Rex by yourself, and you will die. And that that will just happen randomly. So our players, at least online and in person and in playtests, quickly learned that they really needed to largely stick together to live, at least in the wilderness. Like in cities and stuff, they'll split up, but yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned a couple other different games that you want to put out. Do you have any timeline on when the sci-fi stuff is coming out? Or
Dropship, we're hoping to get the first book of that out in November. Timeline on that is basically relying on Nate and I getting enough writing done this month and next month, and our artist getting stuff done on time. So I'm set to meet him tomorrow morning.
Feel your pain.
And if it's a little later, it's not the end of the world. So it's tentatively November. We would like to have it out by then, so that we have it ready for the next season of conventions.
Okay, nice. And you do plan on going to a lot of conventions in person, and if people wanted to see where you're going, how would they find out?
Well, we do post it on the Guilded server, and once we have our schedule finalized, we will also have it up on the website. Currently, we have paid for North Texas RPG Con and which is in June, and we are in the process of setting one up for a convention in Minnesota and another one in Washington, D.C. I was emailing the organizers earlier today. And hearing back from them, and we're trying to work out some details. And so probably by the end of this month, we will have that finalized schedule up on our website. But I don't want to promise things that we haven't actually committed to and paid for yet.
Right. So and if anyone is looking to follow you on YouTube, down in the description, I've got a link to Blackwall Games, to the website, and then also to your Twitter account there, where they can follow along. And it is also pinned in the chat there on YouTube. And for anyone who's watching us on X, which seems to be a number of people, you can follow me at YangYanJao4 there, or why don't you hop on over to YouTube, You get nice replays. You can see all of the chat because on X, for some reason, X and YouTube don't like to talk to each other. You'll get to see all the great comments by people in the chat. So go over to YouTube. I'm Yang Yan Jiao 4 there. You can find this stream there and subscribe and find the links there.
Yeah, one other thing I think worth mentioning is I've been looking at some of your videos. For those who are on X, you might want to check out some of the kind of game philosophy videos and some of the interviews with indie and not so indie creators. Like I think my buddy Rob is on here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he's still technically indie, although he's in the unbelievably successful indie category.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of good gaming videos, comic videos, media, storytelling, some fun stuff.
So do check that out on his channel. And as far as gaming, if you're at all interested, both the audience and our host, if you're at all interested in playing games with me or my co-author, we would love to have you come join our Gilded server and play some Horde Wars with us, or play test material for the other games we have in development.
And if you shoot me a link for I assume it's on Discord for the server, then
it's on a service called Gilded, which is like Discord, but a little better organized.
Nice. That would be nice.
And so what we do is when someone buys through our website, we just send them an invite right away. Otherwise, if someone gets a hold of me directly, I can send you an invite, and then we just keep you in the kind of landing area. And so we have two separate chunks of the server, one for everyone and one for verified purchasers. But you'd be able to join in a game with precons without ever having purchased, just to give it a try if you want to.
Nice. I don't want to keep you on too long tonight, so everyone go check out the Horde Wars Advanced or Basic if you want to start out small. And I will be back tomorrow night talking about Captain America: The Brave New World, and if 2025 is going to kill comic book movies. So Tom, thanks for coming, and